Good evening. Good evening. My name is Sam McGlothlin, and I'm the senior pastor here at Belmead United Methodist Church. And we just want to welcome you to our space, those of you who are here in person and those of you who are watching online. Before we get started, I just want to handle a couple of logistics. If you need something during this event, just look for anyone that's wearing a Belmead t-shirt, and they can help you out. Restrooms are behind you outside the sanctuary in the narthex. And we also have a nursing mother's room with a changing table if you need that as well. And if you need to leave this space for any reason but still want to hear what is happening, you can stand in our narthex and hear the conversation through the speakers. And so I just want to thank you all so much for being here for this incredibly important conversation on gun safety. We're especially grateful to our panelists that are here tonight giving their time and their energy to this conversation, and anybody in the audience that is a community leader. We are hosting this event in our sacred space because we believe that people of faith should offer voice and leadership when it comes to creating a safer community. And we have invited all of you. You come here with your skills, your resources, your backgrounds, your experiences, and we know that it will take all of us coming together to create change. So as you saw in the event's title, we have really organized tonight around care, learn, do. Why should we care about gun safety? What can we learn from each of these people and their respective professions? And maybe most importantly, what can we do about it and how can we take action? And so tonight, just to give you a little overview of the program itself so you know what's coming, we've prepared questions for our panel that I will ask and they will answer. And then you've seen organizations as you've come through our narthex, so each of them will get a couple of minutes to share about who they are. And then when we dismiss, our panelists will stay here in the front so that you can come and speak to them if you'd like to one-on-one. And then our organizations will be in the back to offer you more information about who they are. So before we get started, I invite you to join me in prayer. God, we see around us the suffering, pain, and death that is caused by gun violence. And we know that that is not the abundant life that you intended for your creation. And so we are here, we are present, because we want to be people who have ears to hear and eyes to see how our care, compassion, awareness, education can be turned into action. We pray tonight for those feeling the sting of loss, those sitting in devastation and destruction. We believe you when you say you are close to the brokenhearted and you save those who are crushed in spirit. So collect the tears of those who weep, run to the aid of those in need, and offer them the deep well of your relief and peace. God, as we consider those suffering the consequences of gun violence, we realize that we feel deep heartache. And that may be because you teach us that it is not us and them. It is all of us. We are bound and woven together. We are a human family. And if one part suffers, we all suffer. Help us, God, not to look past or gloss over what we may think is our privilege to avoid. Give us courage to face what is hard and to bring about change together. May we now sense your movement as your presence works in and through our conversation tonight. Amen. All right, I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce who they are and what their profession is, and we're going to start with Keri.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Keri Cress. I am the associate pastor at East End United Methodist Church. I am also a volunteer Metro Nashville Police Chaplain, and because that is not enough, I also work in the field of domestic violence on a crisis hotline.
Thought I had a lot of jobs. I'm Caleb Hemmer. I'm the state representative for the 59th District for Tennessee, which includes this community here in Belmead. It's basically the whole southern border of Davidson County. I was elected this past year, so this is my first term in office. Lifelong Nashville native. I also work in the healthcare industry like a lot of Nashvillians, and live in Forest Hills with my wife and 2 kids.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for the invitation and for hosting this event. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. My name's Dr. Kelsey Gastineau. I'm a pediatrician here in Nashville. I'm a physician advocate and public health researcher focusing on reducing injuries in children, especially firearm injuries.
And my name is Joe Winter. I'm a lieutenant with the Metro Nashville Police Department. I've been with the police department for about 22 years. So I've seen a lot of the devastation that we're going to talk about tonight. My specialty within the police department is with the NIBIN and Gang Investigation Unit. So NIBIN is actually serial gun crime, and that's one half of what I do, and the other half is gang activity. So those things go in tandem, as you can imagine, but it gives me a little bit of a platform to be able to talk about stuff like this.
So a wide array of viewpoints and experience that we have here tonight. And so as we get started, we really want to start with, why is this work important to you personally?
Well, I have to begin by admitting that I have only was for a long time loosely involved with gun reform. I would get the text messages and I would click the button and emails would be sent to my representatives. But it wasn't until, and I said, keep doing that. But it wasn't until the morning of the Covenant school shooting when I received an email from the captain of the chaplain director from Metro Nashville asking for the volunteer chaplains to come out. We usually do our work, the volunteer work, in the middle of the night or on the weekends. And so this was a part of my regular day, and I got an email asking for help in the middle of the day, not hearing any of the news reports, not really knowing exactly what we were walking into, but I responded to that call, found myself getting up from my chair and telling my pastor colleagues that I needed to go. I wasn't sure what was before me, but I needed to go, and I was one of 13 volunteer chaplains that responded that day. And I was routed to the Children's Hospital. Now, the work of the chaplains, especially the volunteer chaplains, is to give death notifications for the next of kin. And that was the work that I was tasked with doing that morning at the Children's Hospital. And so that time was spent sitting with families and waiting with families, and then doing the work of telling families what is every parent's worst nightmare to hear. And in those moments, it was a lot of deep breaths. It was acknowledging that there was nothing that could be said or done to make that moment any better. And sometimes it was just encouraging people to breathe, even if that was the only thing that they could do as they processed the information that was before them, as they processed that they had started their day like everyone else and had then been interrupted to hear this news. You send your child to school so that they may be nurtured, so that they may thrive, and then we have a day like the city of Nashville had on March 27th. And so the role I played in that day was really very small, but it really awakened me to know that there's more work to be done, and that this is a work I could put my whole self into. That as a pastor, it would take more than my prayers, that it would take words, but also actions. And so I found myself that day not just clicking buttons, but showing up at the Capitol And at the Capitol, I heard the cries of so many people. And to me, that became an echo of the cries I'd heard at the Children's Hospital, of the families that are grieving. And it really helped me understand that this grief well is very sacred and personal and belongs to the families of the victims. But that as a community, we're all victimized by this epidemic that is gun violence. That this isn't something that isn't new. It's been going on for a long time. And so it became really important to me that I did whatever it was that I could do and continue to do. And so I used what I had before me, and I encouraged my church to write letters and to show up at the Capitol and meet with representatives. I encouraged through one of my roles in our conference, all the United Methodists in this area and through Memphis and Western Kentucky to reach out to their representatives and show up in the spaces that they could, because I think it'll take all of us, and I knew that it was important to me to do my part.
So the morning of the Covenant shooting started out to be like any other morning. We had some committee meetings, and but it was a big day for me personally, because I've been one of the leading advocates for secure storage and had handled the legislation this past year, and finally starting to get a lot of movement. We had a front page article in the New York Times talking about Tennessee's role and how bad the issue is and what we're trying to do for it. And I was real proud. I had, my mom went and bought, I think, every New York Times in the whole county that day because I had my picture in it. And, sitting in committee and get a text from my wife, said, I've heard there's a shooting, and, just having that, just the chaos kind of factor starting. And then the next one was, hey, I just got a notification our son's school is on lockdown because we go Percy Priest, very adjacent. And so it got very real, very personally, very quickly, on top of, just the burden of being elected official and having, a lot of responsibilities. And so just kind of went into panic mode. And throughout the day, just, more and more information came back. And then, of course, started the legislature, that evening went just totally, started going off the rails that night. And then on the way home, I just had to see it for myself. And so I went to the Covenant that night, drove up, and it was loud up there, and it was right at sundown, and it was just so eerily quiet and tragic. And I still remember it was very cloudy, and it just opened up just enough to have like the most beautiful sunset, and it hit the gold steeple on the top of it. And I have a picture I keep on my phone to this day about it, and it just and I just broke down. I mean, it was just it's just too much, because it really did go full circle for me. For Covenant, roughly 30 years ago, the last time there was a school shooting where it had a death was at J.T. Moore, and I was in that school. I was in the classroom where it happened. And so when you talk about personally, to feel it from a parent, to be in the tragedy in my own life, and it's brought back so many feelings and so much that it's just hard to even process even as an adult today. And then just moving on, starting to learn about the victims, and I went to church, know some of them personally, and just just how I just can't explain. We don't get a lot of, I call it real emails. You talked about the text, but I don't get a lot of real emails and real, phone calls from constituents. And just the days that came about, I mean, thousands of constituents, people, reaching out, expressing concern. It was just, very surreal, even to this day. But it's just, you talk about impact that if you're not changed after seeing that and being a part of that, then something's wrong with you.
As I said, I'm a pediatrician. There is, in my very biased opinion, no greater job on the planet than taking care of kids. It is such a privilege, and I get to do that every day. And I've been doing that for a while now. And a lot of you probably have kids. or at least know a kid. And if you think about what causes them harm or illness, today, even what I've been asked about, maybe in the last hour, you think about things like RSV, you see it on the news, ear infections, pneumonia, asthma, things like that. And I was ready to take care of that when I went in to be a pediatrician and to do my residency. But what I was not ready to take care of was those children who kept coming in with bullet wounds. And it kept happening time and time again. Every time I was in the emergency department in my residency, a kid would come in, whether it was a toddler from an unintentional shooting, whether it was a school-age child or a young teenager from a suicide attempt, or a school-age or teenager from community violence. It was happening time and time again. And that's because it's the leading cause of death for kids and teens in this country and the state where I trained and the state where I live. And that's heartbreaking. As a pediatrician, as a parent for y'all, as a community member, as a human being, that is absolutely heartbreaking. And that is why there was no other option for me than to dedicate my career, my research, and my activism to make sure that until I can stop saying that phrase and I can stop telling parents and people that that is what is causing harm to their children, because there is no worse feeling as a pediatrician than have to tell a parent that they're never gonna see their child walk again, breathe again, play video games. It's horrific. And I never want to have to tell those words to a parent because it's due to gun violence. Because there are so many reasons that children come and see me in the hospital, and the big difference with gun violence is that it is vastly and majority of the time, it is preventable. We have tools that we can start putting into place, and it's past time that we do that. And I never want to have to use those words and say those words to a parent again.
So about 23 years ago, I was in the process to become a policeman. And one of the parts of the process was that you sat in front of a panel of administrators on the police department, captains and deputy chiefs and things like that. And they asked you, which, as you can imagine, is a relevant question, why do you want to be a policeman? So, the answer, and I think it's probably a fairly stock answer, but it's pretty consistent with people who go into the line of work, that the answer is, I remember telling them distinctly, and you can't really elaborate on it. You're just like, I want to help people. So that was my answer. I want to help people. Now, 23 years ago, helping people meant I don't like bullies, and I wanted to help with domestic violence and things like that. You can't really be prepared for the impact of the things that you see along the way, outside of those things that you expect. I'm going to go to a call for service for domestic violence or child abuse or a fight or some violence like that. The scale of violence that happens when it as it pertains to gun violence is much, much deeper than that of what you would think you would just come across as far as domestic violence and things of that nature. So as I've progressed, I've been in roles where I was a detective, as a younger man, much younger man, investigating homicides and shootings and things like that. When you see a lot of those, you think, well, that impacts that person who has been shot or killed. But what you actually find out is that each one of those people is surrounded by people who know them and love them, and that impact is like ripples in a pond, and it really does. It spreads and it impacts a lot of things. We've talked already several times about covenant today, and everybody here knows covenant. There's two other names you've heard, I guarantee you've heard if you live in Nashville, that you should know, and it's Jamela Marlowe and Talia Frazier. And Jamela Marlowe was a 3-year-old little girl that got killed by gunfire, and Talia Frazier was a 4-year-old little girl that got killed by gunfire. And the thing is, those two kids weren't doing anything that would bring gunfire to them, right? The vast majority of the things I see, even in a lot of kids, they get criminally involved, and they get involved in activity that is dangerous in and of itself. That's still not an excuse, but those little girls certainly weren't involved in that. And the guys that engage in gun violence, they don't look at what they're shooting at. So it's important to me because it will affect you. we're all ripples in this pond, right? You may not be able to think of a name even right off bat that you know, but like I had a very, very close friend that killed himself, 6 weeks ago. And that affects everybody. So, you come into the job to help people, and then you actually see the impact on people, and that makes it very personal to you. I worked a homicide in 2005, and I did an okay job. I ended up arresting the guys that did it, and I remember having to give the death notification, or with the chaplains giving the death notification the night of the homicide, and this family was devastated. And then when I arrested the guys, we went to court, and I just remember that I worked an extra job at Walmart, believe it or not, after my shift for several years. And I saw the father used to come into that Walmart all the time. He thanked me every time he saw me. And that made it worth it.
Thank you all for being very real about your answers, and I think that just helps us see how this really affects all of us. Joe, I want to come back to you because I want you to help us understand, can you give us an overview of gun crime in Nashville, like type of firepower we're seeing, the theft of guns from cars, just sort of help teach us, what it is you see, and provide us this overview of gun crime.
You remember the signal earlier?
Yeah,
So
I know it.
We worked
We
out
have a signal for me to cut him off if I need to.
Well, we talked about this because that question, it seems like it could be an easy question to answer, but there are so many facets to it that it's hard to get in. I mean, I could probably go an hour, honestly, on this question. So nobody likes a whole bunch of numbers thrown at them, but the numbers do matter, right? So this year to date, I can tell you we have 276 gunshot wound victims in Nashville as of August the 12th of this year. That's versus 287 the year before. Our 12-year average in Nashville is 355 a year. We went over that the last 4 or 5 years, I can tell you that now. We were up in the 500s during 2020, 2021, 2022, and that's gunshot wound victims. So that's homicide, suicide, accidentals, you name it, runs the gambit. The typical shootings that we see in gun violence. Now, and I'll say this, sometimes you have to define gun violence a little bit more because we're thinking of people who've been hit by gunfire. It's what the doctor sees a lot. But there's a lot of houses out there and a lot of cars with people in them that get shot up, and we just got lucky that nobody got hit. And those don't get talked about, and there's a lot of them. So, we have what I think is a lot of gunshot wound victims in Nashville. You see every array of firearm you can think of, right? People concentrate on maybe even semi-automatic handguns, because semi-automatic handguns are by far the most prevalent out there. But I can tell you, because I look at serial gun crime, right? Crime scenes linked forensically by the cartridge casings that are left. And we see everything, AK-47s. There's a rise in that's called the 7.62 platform, an AR or an AK platform. Well, there's an AR platform too, which is the type the military uses. They are AR, they shoot 226 and 55, or 223 and 556. We're seeing a rise in those right now. Handguns are still by far the most prevalent, but we are seeing shoulder fire weapons out there right now. And that is something to be concerned about, because you have people, that are willing to run around with a weapon that is much more powerful and has a higher capacity magazine just by its very nature. Now, they're willing to carry it with them and commit gun violence, which is a problem. I mean, if somebody has it in their house for, self-defense, or they like to target practice or whatever, that's one thing. But if somebody's willing to ride around in the car with it, they have a whole different set of intentions as they go out. So we have a lot of gunshot wound victims, I think, and I think we're always trying to improve on trying to decrease that from occurring in Nashville, at least. I can tell you if you know what a ghost gun is. Has anybody ever heard of a ghost gun? You've heard of a ghost gun? Okay. So for those who may not know, a ghost gun is basically a pre-manufactured firearm. It's a lower that you can manufacture into an operational firearm, and it's not a firearm that's traceable because you can do it yourself. You can order the parts at home and just make it. So we're seeing a rise in those as well, ghost guns, and they're untraceable. Because the police department, we trace every firearm that we seize. So we can see who the original purchaser was and go talk to them and figure out, how did your gun travel from your hands to the hands of the people who are willing to use them for some criminal purpose. Ghost guns are not able to be traced. So unfortunately, we are seeing a rise in those. We've got 40 since we've been record keeping since 2018, how many ghost guns we have. We got 40 since then, 22 this year alone. They're also manufacturing what's called a sear, or a switch commonly called, for especially Glock handguns. It converts a regular pistol into a fully automatic handgun. You hold the trigger and it just empties the entire magazine. And they make higher capacity magazines for handguns too, so 30 rounds can be shot in just a few seconds. So we count those as well. We've recovered 20 of those this year. So you've got the ability to have a lot more gun violence, especially with those types of mechanisms that are out there. So, we're typically trending above average in our gunshot wound victims, for Nashville at least. We had 69 homicides so far year to date. That's according to our own computer statistics. We had 108 last year. I think that's a little high. It's not near as high as places like Memphis, but we don't want to get to that level either. That's another reason why it would be important to probably everybody in this room, is you need to pay attention to it now, because how many of us have ever had a problem that you could have foreseen coming, but you didn't do anything about it until it affected you personally, right? We don't want to do that, and that's I can tell you that's the police department's stance, is to kind of always improve and to always figure out new ways, evidence-based ways to intercept the problem before it gets out of hand. Getting something under control that's out of hand is much more difficult than keeping it from getting out of hand, if that makes sense. Like I said, I could go on forever, but I think she's about to give me the signal. Again, I'll be here afterwards too if anybody wants any other, especially numbers and things like that. But that's kind of where we're at. We are seeing shoulder fired, we are seeing ghost guns, we are seeing switches, we are seeing a lot of guns stolen from cars, which is the biggest pet peeve. That's another hour. I'm sorry, but don't let it get stolen from your car. And there's a lot of ways to prevent that too.
Thank you. No, it's very helpful for us to hear the. So Dr. Gastineau, we've heard that gun violence is an epidemic, and maybe post-COVID, some people are desensitized to that concept of an epidemic. So what are ways, and we've touched on this a little bit, what are ways that gun violence impacts our health, individual and community, even if, again, we don't experience gun violence personally?
I empathize with y'all if you're over hearing about COVID and epidemic, I get it. But translating some of that into gun violence, it is absolutely a public health crisis and a public health epidemic. It fits all of that in every sense of the word. When you think about children specifically, as I said earlier, it's the leading cause of death for children. We have nearly 4,400 kids and teens dying in this country from firearm injuries. But that's not it. That's not what makes a public health crisis. A public health crisis, 2 to 3 times that number of children and teens are injured. And this isn't just a simple injury that we can put a stitch in and put a sticker on their boo-boo or a Band-Aid on their boo-boo and make them feel better. These are long-lasting, lifelong injuries that kids have, and they get readmitted to the hospital with severe infections, significant pain. These are things that will last their entire lives, but it's much more than that even. Think about when a child is exposed to violence in their neighborhood, in their schools. These lead to things like disruption at school. It's impossible for a child to sit in a classroom and think about doing their math or their reading when they're terrified about going home or walking through their constant gunshot wounds or gunshots. They are not getting their basic needs of safety. So it's nearly impossible for them to do that. They're going to have sleep disruption. They're going to be angry, and rightfully so. And so we can't have these major expectations for these kids when they're constantly having their flight or flight response just at an all-time high. And these are just the kiddos. Think about all of the other impacts. Think about what happens to a parent when they lose a child or a sibling. Think about what happens to the other community. These are not just single issues. You heard Joe talk about it. This is a ripple effect. What happens to one person does not just happen to one person. If a child is injured, that incident happens to their sibling, their parent, their best friend, their cousin, their neighbor. Everybody is impacted. And the other way, if something happens to an adult, that incident happens to their child. That child carries that through their entire life. And you can't expect anything different, which again is what Joe was mentioning. We have to do something about it now so we have happy, healthy, thriving children that grow up into happy, healthy, thriving adults, and our communities are better and better and better as the years go on.
Sam, can I quickly? I wanted to touch on this really quickly because what the doctor was saying, it has two things that I want to touch on that she touched on. So first, there's a criminologist named Lonnie Athens. He wrote a book there was a book written about his work called Why They Kill. It's a 4-step process as to how somebody becomes a violent individual. That's the first step. The very first step is violent subjugation, of the observance of some form of brutality, and that sticks with especially a young child. And that if it completes the process, they can become a violent individual themselves, which is another reason not to wait. All right. Shoot, I lost my train of thought on that second one. I'm sorry, but I can't stress that enough. I mean, I think everybody should read that book, especially if you're interested in what creates violent people. But
I can give you his second thought. There's another book called Children Under Fire, which is a lot of just that answer, and my answer is a nutshell of that entire book. It's phenomenal, and I would highly recommend it.
The other part of a social contagion, as if you want to call it that, or treating it like a societal illness, is that there's many gunshot wound incidents that occur, and I can tell you this from personal experience. I look at all the reports, I see everything. It spreads. All right, so if there can be somebody shot today, and I can tell you there's a lot of people who are shot in Nashville who will not follow up with prosecution or assist in the investigation, and it's because typically there's some form of retaliatory, desire that they have. Well, that's just like a disease, right? Violence was done upon them. They want to do violence in return, and it just spreads. And again, just like little Talia and little Jamela, they weren't doing anything, but somebody was shooting at somebody they were with, and they were the ones who were injured or, in this case, killed in the process. So that's a little bit like an illness in itself, is that when violence occurs and they don't want to prosecute, they don't want to go through the legal process, they want to retaliate, and it continues the violence. So it acts in an illness in that way too.
So Representative Himmer, the special session has been called. Can you help us understand how it works and what individuals can do, and how and when is the best time to make their voices heard?
Yesterday. So the governor called us into special session, which creates some new rules, and it's going to be beginning Monday at 4 o'clock. And so per basically he's put out an order that allows, basically dictates what items, what subjects can be put forth during special session. So it's going to be a lot around some mental health issues. They're going to have some kind of court reform, and then a very minor piece about safe storage. So, overall, I'm pretty conflicted about some stuff, in that, I'm very appreciative that the governor is, putting forth basically calling us back to have this conversation, but also disappointed that we didn't go far enough. I mean, the safe storage is probably again, because that's my issue, but it really, look at the subject of the call, it really is one of the things it's disappointing, because it says, we'll basically promote items that promote safe storage, but, we won't have any penalties, associated with that. So it's like, in my mind, there's nothing more hypocritical than saying and recognizing there's a problem, but being unwilling to do anything about it. However, it's the governor's call, so we have to play within those rules. So I've been doing lots of jockeying behind the scenes with our clerks and our lawyers, trying to fit things within that specific, call. And so, what things you can do to get involved? I mean, first of all, you're doing it today. I mean, how awesome is this? A room full of people want to show up and learn and have a conversation about this. So continue to do that. Do that with your neighbors. One of the things I've been saying, at least for Nashville, is we have this bubble around Nashville, theoretically, that people have been so affected by Covenant and passionate about this issue across party lines because of those personal items that we talked about. I got just as many people in the far ends of the state that are just as passionate about not doing anything. And that's important to remember in that, and again, I think another thing is go speak to these groups that will be here afterwards in the hall to get involved, because it's very frustrating for a lot of people when they, in our areas locally, and they come to me and say, gosh, I'm glad you're for some of the things I'm for and very passionate about it, but what can I do about these 2 miles down in Williamson County? It's the exact opposite. And so what I tell you is, like, you've got 3 friends that live outside of Davidson County or have key legislators. Call them, tell them how passionate about you are, and ask them to call them. If I had everyone in this room call me in a day or in a week about an issue, I would be, whatever you want to do, I would be blown away, because again, not many people do that. So again, having that personal, aspect of interacting with us and letting us know how you feel, let us know your story, but also being an advocate yourself and finding other people to get involved. It really is going to take that. I kind of liken it to the civil rights. It was not done in a day. It took a long time. And so while I have a lot of people, and me included, are very disappointed that we're not going far enough this special session. The glass half full, jolly guy in me wants to say, it's the first step, and it's going to take time, and to keep working on people. You keep the faith.
Keri, why do you think it matters that people of faith are involved in this conversation?
I think it's part of our call to follow Jesus. I think a lot of people want to argue, don't get political, but I encourage you to go back and read what Jesus did, because what Jesus did was to challenge the status quo and flipped literal and figurative tables and encourage people to go to the margins, to bring in people who are not on the inside. And this Covenant shooting was just one of many, and many of those happened in the margins and places that we don't hear about. I'm so glad Lieutenant Joe gave us some names that maybe we don't know. But Jesus encourages us to go and do, and from the Methodist background, our book of resolutions and our stance on gun reform looks to Micah, the prophet Micah, who envisions this world that God created for us, the mountain of the Lord that is our end goal. And in that place, spears will be made into plowshares. Weapons will be transformed into tools that feed people, that bring well-being, flourishing, bring us into this abundant life. So I think that is a part of who we're called to be. I think as people who pray the Lord's Prayer every week in worship, and we say, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," I think we should question whether or not we keep praying that if we're not willing to start working here on earth. So I think it's part of who we're supposed to be. I'm going to do a sports analogy, even though I don't know anything about sports, because it's a team sport. We are to be players. We're to be called out onto the field. It's not a spectator sport. It's not a spectator faith, but we are supposed to be people who live what we believe and what we say.
So before we came out here, we sort of had our own conversation, and Dr. Gastineau, I want you to kind of bring up how your doctors felt on that day, and sort of this, not speech, but how you helped them to talk about and differentiate between helplessness and hopelessness.
Yeah, the conversation that we were having back there was just this this horrific feeling that I'm sure a lot of you all felt that day, that we kind of touched on, that you didn't have to be directly impacted, that even if you were in Nashville, this thing that you never thought could happen in your community was happening. And it was a feeling. I've been doing this work for a while, y'all. I've been researching firearm injuries in kids. I've been trying to figure out the solutions. I can spout off probably any number that you want to hear about the statistics of firearm injuries in kids. That day was different. That day was very different, and the look on my colleagues' faces, and the fear, and the sadness, and the just complete devastation was just so different, and I'll never forget that. It was probably the hardest day that I've had. And I want to acknowledge that happened to everyone probably in this room, and the families that happened to was very real and awful. And the conversations that we had after that was a lot about what we're trained to do as physicians. We have so many tools. I made the kind of quip that they don't hand us a medical degree in one day. I promise they train us, and they train us well. We have a lot of tools at our disposal, but when you can't use them, that really hurts. And so a lot of the conversations that I've had with physicians, and not just in this instant, I've had a lot of conversations with friends that have been involved in other instances and events like this, and other mass shootings involving children. It's eerie how a lot of people have the same response, that they feel helpless because they can't do anything. Because when a child is shot with a specific type of weapon, there is nothing they can do. And there is nothing like that. As a provider, when you have trained for years to save a child's life and you can't do it, it's awful. And you feel helpless and you feel powerless. So a lot of our conversations that I really wanted to get our providers to is, how do we stop that feeling? We feel it and we talk about it and we acknowledge it, but we don't let it get to hopeless. Because we can't feel hopeless in this moment. Because the second we start feeling hopeless, we allow children to keep dying in vain, and we will not ever allow that to happen. And so how we do that is we have these conversations. We talk to the incredible people that we have here. We talk about the importance of secure storage. It works. We know that securing firearms keeps kids safe. It keeps them from unintentional shootings. It keeps them from suicide. It keeps them from community violence. It really helps. And so I challenge you, if this is something that you're very passionate about, if you're a firearm owner yourself, if you know someone, ask. Ask about the presence of unsecured firearms in the homes that your kids go and visit. Ask about it at a neighborhood meeting. It's so important, and it can really save a child's life today, truthfully, today. Use your voice in whatever capacity you have. As physicians, we talked about that. We have a voice. It's so privileged. We are so privileged for people. I mean, I'm literally holding a microphone because people will listen. And you all have a voice in some capacity. You are a parent. You are a community member. You are a member of a church. You have some community that you are a part of, and people will listen. And so go and spread that word that firearm injuries are the leading cause of death for kids, and we are no longer going to accept that to be true in this state and in this country, and we have solutions.
Joe, or anybody else who would like to answer, we know that there are law-abiding gun owners, and we just, how can a law-abiding gun owner be a part of this conversation? Why is it important for them to be a part of this conversation?
Well, I'll bounce right. Doctor and I are we're gonna bounce off each other the whole night. I think. Yeah, we're gonna take it on the road. In saying and following up immediately with what she just said, you can go right now. Anybody in the city can go right now to any precinct in the city and get a free gun lock. Right now, we'll give it to you free of charge.
We also have some in the back today.
Oh, okay, good. See, all right, well, there you go. And the reason for that is the responsible gun ownership, right? So I don't care your stance on guns one way or the other. If somebody chooses to own a firearm, you should just be responsible about it. So I can tell you for a fact, as of now, late last week, 777 guns were stolen from cars alone. That's year to date. We're in August. So there's almost 1,000 stolen, period. Now, that's out of houses, and from a few other methods. But the vast majority of our guns, 80% that are stolen out of vehicles, which is probably, and this isn't even related to gun violence in the sense that somebody's immediately going to get shot. If you're not securing your firearm in the home, anybody can pick that firearm up and harm themselves or somebody else. Sometimes it's not just a child that's handling it that hurts themselves. They will shoot other children on accident. It's glorified in movies, and a lot of parents I don't think, guard their kids as much as they should as far as what they watch. So when they're playing, they'll literally play with a live firearm that's already chambered, and bad things can happen. So secure that firearm. That's how they fit in right now. If you're going to be a gun owner, be very, very responsible about it. Teach your children about firearms and how dangerous they can be. I taught mine from the moment they could understand. And it was always secured. Bullets actually were in another part of the house. They couldn't even get to it. And I'm a paranoid cop who thinks people are trying to break into his house all the time. So secure those guns. If you're gonna leave it in your vehicle, there's ways to secure it in your vehicle, because outside of accidental shootings that occur in the home, and when they get their hands on a firearm that's just laying around for some reason, guns get stolen from cars and guns gets used. I can tell you that for a fact. Like I said, I know because I get the reports on the firearms that are seized that we can forensically say were used in different crimes. So there's like 116 of those year to date that I can tell you right now from the records that we keep. We know that they were stolen from cars and they were used in crimes. So if you don't secure it, somebody in your own family could come to harm. If you don't secure it, somebody could get it and then use it against somebody else, and then you end up with a Covenant or a Talia or a Jamela. So responsible gun ownership is by far, I think, the first step to at least starting to address the problem. So there's other things that can be done, but if you're going to be a gun owner, secure it and keep it away from kids. And by all means, tell them how dangerous it is and teach them how dangerous it is. But that's where it starts.
Just to add on that, I think you really hit the nail on the head talking about responsible gun ownership, and that's kind of one of the things I've been trying to do, because again, we are trying to change hearts and minds for people that probably doesn't think a lot like the folks in this room. And so, I spend a lot of times with my colleagues talking about that, particularly on the other side of the aisle. And, one of the things, I'd say, I love hunting and fishing. It's like my passion. I may be a Democrat and the gun reform issue is much more prevalent on my side of the aisle. I talk to my colleagues a lot about this because, it is about gun responsibility, and that is a message that it kind of goes across both parties. I try to preach that as much as I can because, at the end of the day, that's the issue we're trying to get through, is there's a clear delineation, and, you have these both sidesism, and from an NRA perspective, they'll say, it's always about trying to take my gun away and trying to take my gun away. No, it's not about that. It's the first one they'll say, yeah, I love going hunting, I love taking my firearm, but you know what I love more? My kids, and I love them not being shot. And really, so I say that in that, when you're having these conversations with your friends and neighbors and others, it really is, people go to their corners on this. It just excites so much passion. So you have to try to meet people in the middle and where they are, and talking about that responsibility really is key.
I want to give you each the opportunity to say a final word if you'd like to.
I'm going to talk.
Dr. Gastineau will go first.
Go ahead and start it off. I think this is kind of inspired by what the representative was just saying. I think we see a lot in the newspaper, on the news, in media in general, that this is such a divisive topic. That we all are told that we feel a certain way. But in reality, the vast majority of all of us are somewhere in the middle, and we all agree on a lot of these very common sense solutions that we have pretty good evidence to support that can save lives today. And I will tell you, in the conversations I have as a human and the conversations I'm having as a physician, talking about things like secure storage, helping kids stay safe from firearms, there is not this big debate and there is not this anger. They are actually just two people having a conversation to keep kids safe. And I think that's wonderful, and that's how we should be approaching this. And so I would just leave you with that whole everybody's in their corners and everybody's really angry at each other is actually just this myth that only really exists at those capitals. But actually, the reality is what's happening right here, and we need to lean into that because that's how we keep our kids and our communities safe.
Yeah, so of course, bouncing off the doctor, that's a little bit of the reason I have a bit of a pessimistic view on how we can actually go forward with this stuff, because people don't know how to see gray areas. And I think if we all, started looking at this from a perspective a little bit more of how about we start where we agree, and then we can get into the nuances of what we disagree about. And there's a lot of things that we agree about. I dare anybody in this room to raise their hands and say that you shouldn't lock your firearm up, especially when children are around. And here's the other thing: sometimes you don't know when there's a child around, right? Maybe your brother dropped off your nephew, and your wife knew about it, but you didn't, and your gun is still out. So there's lots of nuances to it. But everybody in here would agree you got to secure your firearms, I would think. Nobody in here wants their firearms stolen from them at a very basic level. Let's take the safety out. You don't want your property stolen from you. Do things to prevent that. And there are easy, very, very simple things you can do to prevent that. Talk to each other about it. If you and your friends have firearms, hey, how do you secure yours? You may find something that you like that you want to adopt into your own household about how to secure that firearm, because you still should. Here's the other thing. We deal a lot with the supply side of guns, and I'm trying to get into the supply side of guns a lot more, because how a gun gets in the hand of someone who's willing to use it is very, very important to my work. And I can tell we've interviewed a lot of people whose firearms ended up being in the hands of somebody who used it for ill purposes. And I can tell you, it's probably a 50, not even a 50-50 split, probably 40-60. There's 40% of the people out there are extremely responsible about who they sell their firearms to. There's websites like Arms List out there, and my personal beliefs on firearm, I think if you can own a firearm and you want to get one, you should be able to. But if you're going to sell that firearm, know who you're selling to. And I've about 40% of the people out there, there's some that keep immaculate records of who they sell to and when they sell. There's other people, and that's probably closer to 60%, no records at all. Just sold the firearm, didn't do any checking. He looked old enough, he looked okay, didn't do anything, didn't keep a record of who they sold it to, things like that. And I even had a guy tell me one time, I called him up, and we talked about it. I sold it to a guy in Walmart parking lot. We made arrangements over the internet. We met, and he gave me the money, I gave him the gun. And I said, well, that gun was used here in Nashville. He was in Texas, by the way. And he goes, this is the second time you guys have called me about this. You guys should really have some better laws about this. That's what the guy told me over the phone. I couldn't believe it. So if you have friends there's people out there that they like to buy firearms, they like to sell firearms. There's nothing illegal about that. Be responsible about who you sell it to, because that goes in tandem with securing your firearms in your house or in your car. The supply of guns, if you can stem that to that flow to people who are willing to use them and commit these violent acts, you're going to impact things immediately right off the bat. I can promise you that. And I think that's a gray area where we can all agree. Like the representative said, nobody's trying to take anybody's guns. Right now we're just saying be responsible about it. And that's like a bare minimum. I think that would help a lot.
A couple takeaways I like to tell people: vote like your kids' or grandkids' lives depend on it, because it does. I'd say get involved. We'll talk about a little bit about that next, in whatever fashion that you feel comfortable for, and get educated. I mean, these are complicated issues. I've been really impressed that Tennessee has been doing a really good job of some gun-related stories over the past week, and since COVID and on. For example, how I talk about secure storage. I mean, we're the number one state in the country for guns being stolen out of vehicles. Those guns are going directly in the hands of criminals. My Senate sponsor likes to joke and say, kind of tongue in cheek, that you would actually have less effect if you had a giveaway guns day to gangs. Think about it. Like, we're giving 1,000+ guns away to get to criminals who are taking them. It's a crime of opportunity. It's really hard to get caught. Only 3.3% statewide of the people were ever caught. And the other thing is, when people do get caught, it's a very, very hard crime to prosecute, because of all the nuances Joe talked about. These guns could go 6 different hands. It's hard to find the owner. Sometimes the owner doesn't want to even show up to court to help prosecute this. So it's a really, really bad problem. So again, we got 3% get caught, 97% don't. If we can figure out what we can do for those 97%, which is tie it back to gun responsibility, we may can move the needle without a law. Thank you.
I think I want to lean into hope. I know what our representative said here, talked about the very narrow window of what the session is, and I don't, especially maybe those of us who are a little bit more new to being involved in this, is that this is going to take some time, and not to give up. And I was talking to, I have a partner in this work in my congregation, and she gave me these words today that one of her family members said over and over, and I'm going to forget what it is now. Oh, but it's like, drop by drop, the bucket is filled. And that is a proverb that she shared with me. And I think we need to remember that things already aren't going the way that I hoped, with, like, I would like to say, extreme risk protection order. And I would like us to remember that this is a complicated issue that involves both mental health and how we secure and store and make available weapons. So I would like to say, don't let anyone simplify this gun violence for you. It is complex and multi-layered, and there are things we can agree upon it, but don't give up. If things don't automatically change after this special session, but there's more work to be done, and we need to keep doing it.
Can we appreciate our panelists for their time and energy? Okay, we really wanted you to be able to walk out of here with some action items and things that you can do. And so you may have noticed as you walked in, we have Awake Tennessee, Be Smart, and Protect Kids Not Guns. And so we're going to invite Brenda and Claire and Ingrid to come forward. And they're each going to share very briefly, just about 2 minutes each, about their organization, what they think you can do. Sorry, you got to walk the long aisle as you make your way up.
Thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for being here. I'm Claire Harris Kramer. I am representing Be Smart, which is the educational arm of Moms Demand Action Against Gun Violence. Thank you. The Be Smart acronym stands for Secure All Guns in Your Home and Vehicles. Model responsible behavior around guns. Ask about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes. As a mom of a 5-year-old and a newly 1-year-old, that's something that's on my radar with play dates, especially in homes that I haven't been in. Are you a gun owner? If so, are your weapons secured? Is ammunition stored away from the gun? The R is for recognize the role of guns in suicide. And T is tell your peers to be smart. So I'm at the table, one of the tables in the back. We have gun locks. I'd love to tell you more about Be Smart or about Moms Demand Action. And thank you all for being here.
Claire, thank you so much for all the work you're doing and to advance that policy. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brenda Gadd, and I'm with Awake Tennessee, Advocates for Women and Kids Equality, and we're an organization that's focused on the systemic advancement of women and youth. In order to do that, it is to protect our youth and ensuring youth safety and wellness. And then we also have been working with several partner organizations. So we're so grateful for everyone that's been up here on this panel. Thank you for inspiring, encouraging, and I think everyone can walk away knowing that, as we've heard, our voices matter. And so one of the ways we want to encourage you to get involved could be through Awake. There are also amazing organizations, though if you find another route, we are thrilled by that. And we want to make sure we connect you with that too. So we have a Day on the Hill sponsored this Wednesday, and hopefully we'll get to Representative Hemmer's office to be present if he's not in committee. I know he doesn't have his schedule probably fully yet for next week, but our Day on the Hill is Wednesday, August 23rd. As you heard, the legislature convenes for our special session on Monday, so we would encourage you, we'd love to have you with us. You can go to our website, awaketn.org. We've got a pamphlet back there to give that to you. Easy enough to go onto events, and you'll see our Day on the Hill registration. I'll make sure that you have all the information. We'll walk you through that. We are analyzing all the bills. The bill filing deadline for the House is this Friday, and so we'll be spending the weekend to prepare analysis and positions on legislation, so we'll be all ready. So we would love to have you. If there's another organization that you've heard about that you want to connect with, we'll make sure that you have that connection as well. We're doing it in partnership with Moms Demand Action. We've got Protect Kids Not Guns, which we'll hear from, and many other organizations, so I don't mean to leave anyone out. So we're so grateful to be here tonight, so thank you so much. Thank you.
Good evening. I want to stand by you. Good evening. My name is Ingrid McIntyre. I'm a United Methodist clergy person here in Nashville, and I'm working with a group of young people that we have decided to call Protect Kids Not Guns. We sort of sprung up during the expulsions, really, after Covenant happened, with a lot of energy. So we have a QR code in the back for you. There's about 200 of these, so if you want to grab a couple extra for people at work or home or church or tennis club or wherever you want to take them. But these QR codes will lead you to this fantastic research binder that has tabs on things like the Second Amendment, on polling that's been done in this area, on mental health. I have to look at all the tabs now. It has a lot of one-pagers of facts, rebuttals, mental health stuff, policy briefs. So that is all on this QR code right here. All the information that you need to be able to talk to your friends, your family, your politicians, your elected officials. It can be a difficult or it can be a daunting conversation, right? If you've never done it before, that is for sure. And it is not ever easy the first time, but as a seasoned caller / writer / trouble stirrer, I have gotten used to it, and I will say that you too can do this. You too can make phone calls, you too can write letters, and you too can show up and be present. And we will be present with you there. I would just like to give a special shout out to the prayer service that we're having. It's not a service, but a prayer time that we're having at 8:30 a.m. We'll gather on Monday, we'll gather at Legislative Plaza, and then we are literally gonna surround the Capitol. We're gonna hold hands and say prayers around the Capitol. All people of all faiths are welcome. So please come at 8:30 on Monday morning before the special session begins so that we can really pray up our folks who are active in that process. We also have some gun locks, thanks to Keri, at our table and are happy to give those away. And ingrid.mcintyre@gmail.com if you have any questions and want to talk to me.
So on the back of your program, you'll see some next steps, and two of these were mentioned. There is a gathering at the temple across the street on Sunday from 2 to 5, another interfaith conversation on healthy gun culture and responsibility. If you would like to go to the Capitol tomorrow, there's a nonprofit called Covenant Families for Brighter Tomorrows, and some of our people from Belle Meade are going to go down and pray with this group that has been praying for the last 40 days, I believe. And so if you'd like to be a part of that, you can show up here tomorrow morning. Anyway, you will see all of these opportunities and ways to get involved. The people that just spoke are going to be in the narthex as you leave, so you can interact with them and get more of their information. And our panelists are going to stay here up in the front if you would like to talk to them. So we thank you all so much for being here tonight, and we hope you have a safe night.